Welcome back to Breakfast. The assassination of one of Hamas's top leaders has thrust the Middle East further into chaos. Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated while in Iran for the inauguration of its new president. Hamas and Iranian media blame Israel for the missile strike, but Israel has neither confirmed nor denied being behind it. Haniyeh's death comes after Hezbollah issued a statement this morning confirming that Fouad Shukra was killed in the Israeli airstrike in Beirut yesterday. Earlier I spoke to Middle East and US policy analyst Nader Hashemi and asked him how surprised he was by the top commander's death.
This was widely suspected. He was the target of the attack in southern Beirut. Hezbollah hasn't confirmed his death until this moment. And everyone suspected that was the case. He was probably buried under the rubble. They've probably just discovered his body. And it will just add to, the tensions in the region. Hezbollah now is going to want to respond. Iran is going to want to respond. And I think this is a significant development because up until now, the calculation and the assumption was that Iran and Hezbollah did not want an expansion of this conflict. They wanted to keep things in check. But now, because of these two assassination attempts, both Hezbollah and Iran have every incentive to reject that old playbook and now to escalate, having suffered these two losses in Beirut and in Tehran. So I think for these reasons, I think events over the last 24 hours are a significant game changer.
And Nader, I want to come back to those losses that you mentioned about. How significant is Haniyeh's death?
I think it's very significant because this particular assassination has brought the Middle East to the brink of a broader regional war. And the fact that this assassination took place in the capital city of Iran, in the aftermath of the inauguration of the new Iranian president, will be interpreted inside Iran as an act of provocation. Objectively speaking, it's deeply humiliating that Iran could not protect a foreign dignitary or guest on its own soil. And of course, this is not the first time something like this has happened. There's been a long history of Israel hitting high-value targets inside Iran, raising sort of serious questions about Iranian internal security and its ability to prevent these types of attacks. And of course, this is all happening because of the fallout from the war in Gaza, which is now into its 10th month with no sign of it ending anytime soon. I think one of the key significant developments of this assassination is that it effectively brings to an end any hope or possibility of a ceasefire deal in Gaza that would allow for the release of the Israeli hostages and humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza. Israel effectively has ended that possibility when they assassinated last night the lead negotiator on the Palestinian side. So that story is effectively over, and I think we're headed toward increasing escalation. Everyone is watching right now to see how Iran will respond.
I want to take a step back. You say it happened on Iran's soil. What statement do you think Iran will send?
Well, I think Iran wants to send a statement and a message that it has the capacity to establish deterrence. And what that means is that it has the ability and capability to push back and hit Israeli targets to prevent these things from happening again, simply from the logic of interstate rivalry and conflict. If Iran doesn't respond in some sort of vociferous and robust way, that will simply invite more Israeli attacks. So I think if one wanted to get a sense of how Iran will respond, one has to go back to events in April of this year, when we had a very similar set of circumstances. In early April, Israel hit a high-value target in Iran's embassy compound in Damascus, killing roughly 7 senior military commanders. Roughly 2 weeks later, Iran responded to that assassination of its senior leaders with a barrage of 300 missiles and drones that were directed toward Israel. Most of them were shot down, and Israel had advance warning, but it wanted to sort of flex a muscle and show that, look, Iran is not going to be able, it is not willing anymore to take these hits on high-value targets sitting down. So I think that's likely what Iran is going to do. And of course, the danger here is then Israel will then have to retaliate and respond, and then we get into this escalation of which there's no end in sight, and it could easily spin out of control.
What will it mean for Hamas and its organisation? And Nader, are there any successors in place to replace Haniyeh?
Yeah, there's many successors. This is not a new story. Unfortunately, Israel thinks that simply if you assassinate the senior leader of its of an enemy organization, that's going to be the end of it. But Israel has been doing this for a very long time. In fact, I would argue since the 1960s, when a Palestinian national movement emerged under the name of the PLO, Israel has been assassinating its leaders. And then when Hamas emerged in the late 1980s, early 1990s, Israel was doing the exact same thing. But of course, it hasn't made Israel any more secure. In fact, I would argue it's the exact opposite. And I think the events on October the 7th demonstrate this fact. So this is not going to solve the conflict. It's going to give Benjamin Netanyahu a boost within his core base of supporters, but it's simply going to perpetuate the war, the crisis. There are other leaders that will replace Ismail Haniyeh, most likely the figure of Khalid Mishal, which is a senior leader who will probably take over. But I suspect the more radical voices will rise to the top. We're not in favor of any negotiation, hostage deal, ceasefire, but want to, perpetuate this conflict on the battlefield. I think that's probably the likely result of this.
Dr. Nader Hashemi, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite.